Good morning.
Today's Gospel reading, Mark 10, verse 46 to 52, page 1210. Jesus heals blind Bartimaeus. Jesus and his disciples went to Jericho, and as they were leaving, they were followed by a large crowd. A blind beggar by the name Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. When he heard that it was Jesus from Nazareth, he shouted, "Jesus, son of David, have pity on me." Many people told the man to stop, but he shouted even louder, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him over." They called out to the blind man and said, "Don't be afraid, come on. He is calling for you." The man threw off his coat as he jumped up and ran to Jesus. Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man answered, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "You may go, your eyes are healed because of your faith." Right away the man could see, and he went down the road with Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Praise the Lord.
I've titled my message today, "With God, anything is possible."
Yes.
And I truly, truly believe it.
Yes, I do too.
In this story of the blind man, he's healed. But there are cases when they aren't healed, or when somebody has some kind of horrible disease, or like terminal cancer. Sometimes you hear about miraculous healing, and sometimes you don't. And it's very difficult to try to rationalize why one person gets healed and another person doesn't. And I'm certainly not here today to do that, because I don't know the reason. And I think if anyone thinks they do, boy, I think they're really not being honest with themselves. But with God, anything is really possible. And I wanted to share with you a story about a woman by the name of Elizabeth. This was several years ago. She had lost her husband. She was really, really depressed. She had no children, and she had been an only child, and her husband had been an only child. So they didn't have a lot of close relatives, obviously, around to comfort her. She was in her late 40s, and he had died of some horrible kind of a disease. I really don't know what exactly it was. Very depressed. And so she was standing outside of a bank when a fellow who had been her boyfriend back in high school saw her. They really hadn't had much of any communication in the meantime. Said, "Oh, Elizabeth, you look so depressed. I know I can help you." And so he was telling her about this new church that he had been going to. And that, "Oh, I know that they would, they'd fix you. It would make everything just fine." And so she didn't think much of it. She had been a person of faith, but she was now having some real problems because she prayed and prayed and prayed while her husband was in the hospital. But he died anyway. And sometimes people like to blame God, and they're mad because the prayer wasn't answered the way they wanted it. And so she went home that day, and two young women came driving up in a little red sports car, and they introduced themselves, and they said that, oh, they had been from that church where Paul, his name was going, and they, were there to comfort her. And they were asking her about her own family, and she says, "Well, I don't have any family." And so they said, "Well, we'll be your daughters. We'll be there." And so they invited her to the church and everything. And the preacher was a good preacher. He wasn't boring. He preached fire and whatever, he was really not boring. But when she got there, she had a difficulty with the style of worship. And the thing is, there's many ways to worship. And anyone who criticizes another person's style doesn't realize that we're all different. What speaks to one person turns off another person, and vice versa. We're all different. We need to find our own meaningful way in which to worship God. And it might be really loud rock music. It might be something very contemplative. It might be a lot of talking. It might be very, very quiet and meditative. There's just so many ways in which we can worship God, praise the one who created us, and feel a sense of wholeness. And I am the last one on this planet to tell you that my way is the only way, because it isn't. There are just many, many ways in which you can come close to God. But what happened to Elizabeth that day, even though she let Paul know that she didn't want to come to that church, she finally cried her heart out. And she hadn't cried one tear since her husband had been pronounced dead. She was just like no feeling, kind of like empty, like a vacuum. And that's really what was wrong. She couldn't really let her emotions out. And when she went home that day from that church, she cried and cried, and tears were coming down her cheeks, which hadn't been present at all before. And being able to do that, she emptied herself of all of her sorrow and anxiety and loss for her husband, and finally felt God's presence. Actually felt God loving her and caring for her and telling her that things would be all right. And guess what? They were. Anything is possible with God, and God was there all the time. It just took a while to see that. One thing I feel very grateful for, my lovely departed cat Esther, who chopped up with her teeth a sermon that I had written many, many years ago, and ever since that time I never preached with any kind of paperwork, which frees me up to address things that happen that I wouldn't be able to do if I had spent all my time on a prepared sermon and then the world had changed and I wouldn't be relevant, right? I want to talk now about what happened yesterday. I think most of you are aware that some folks in a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, were shot by a fellow who hated Jewish people, who said all Jews need to die, and went in there, and 11 people were killed, many more injured, and particularly some of the police officers who really stormed in there and braved the whole situation, and also got shot in the process. I don't want to hear anyone in this church say anything against anyone from another faith tradition. It's really, really ugly. Because when we say anything unkind about someone, whether they're Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or Sikh or whatever, we're saying to our Creator, who's listening, you really goofed up this time, God. These people that you made really aren't very good. Isn't that what you're saying, really? When you criticize another person because of their faith tradition? Or who they are, their ethnic group, or whatever? I've heard things like, the only good Muslim is a dead Muslim. I don't want to hear that again. Oh yeah, I've heard that. And all Jews are, you know, rich and conniving and want to take all your money. Excuse me? I grew up with my very best friend, Michael Golden, whose father worked at a retail store for men. Believe me, they weren't rich. He was the only Jewish kid in our high school at that time. From my own family background, I don't come from a background of people who are open and loving and thinking the nice thoughts about other people. I come from a background of my mother's family, hating just about everybody. I was taught that Jews are no good. That's what I was taught. And when my grandmother found out that Michael and I were such good friends, she was not exactly happy about it. Why I am the way I am, I don't know. By the grace of God, I don't know. Because I certainly wasn't brought up to be this way. I was brought up in a family of hate and negative comments. And there's so many negative comments going around now about all sorts of people. This person has a problem and that person has a problem. Hello, look in the mirror before you criticize anybody else. Take a good look. My favorite of all things, which is a little on the humor side, I have seen fellows, you know, there you are, they're coming down the street, they're, you know, the gut, right? And they look at a woman, oh, look at her, oh my gosh, wow, has she put on weight? And I felt like running, mirror, mirror, please, mirror, look at yourself. That's the humorous part, because I've seen a lot of that. I don't want to hear about anybody's weight, whether skinny or fat, all right? You are all created by God.
Amen.
And God loves each and every one of you.
Amen. Amen.
You are beautiful people because God created you.
Julie,
And God loves you. Yes.
doesn't that also apply to political leaders?
Oh yeah, I don't want to hear about it. It's so ugly, I don't even want to hear about
They
it.
send bombs in, I guess, the mail.
People, if we all looked at each person as one of God's children, would we want to hurt one of God's children? Whether they agreed with us or disagreed with us? We all have different opinions. That's normal. Because we have different backgrounds. We have different values. We came from different families, maybe in different regions of the world. So we don't all think alike. And it would be kind of boring, wouldn't it, if we all thought alike? I think it'd be really, really boring.
Especially if we're wrong.
If everyone agreed with me, I wouldn't have anybody to argue with. That wouldn't be any fun, right?
Yeah.
No. But what I want all of us to do is to, every time you look at somebody, and maybe they haven't been so nice, that's one of God's children. And especially the way my grandmother hated Jews. Jesus was a Jew. He never was a Christian, ever. That came later. Jesus was a Jew. And his name wasn't Jesus. It was Yeshua. Yeah, it was Yeshua. Good Jewish boy. And if we claim to follow him, how can we hate Jewish people? Because he was Jew. He was a Jew. With God, anything is possible.
Yes, it is.
And one of the possible things I want to talk about today is a change of heart. You know that song, Change My Heart, O God? That is what we all can do. We can all change our hearts to behold all of God's creation, including the wonderful people that God has created. And as I always say, God doesn't make junk. Amen. Amen. I invite you